Could we be on the brink of another pandemic? Well, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention confirmed Thursday the first severe human case of bird flu in the U.S. The first human case of bird flu was found in Louisiana and announced this week. The hospitalized patient had been in contact with sick and dead birds in backyard flocks on her property, typically not a good idea. The patient, a 65-year-old with underlying conditions, remains hospitalized.
This case is the first H5N1 bird flu in the country that has been linked to what is called backyard flock exposure. This prompted California Governor Gavin Newsom to declare a state of emergency over bird flu. The virus has been detected among 645 cattle herds in California. This is more cases than any other state. Newsom stated in his emergency announcement that the risk of contagion is low. The CDC also acknowledged that the risk of getting bird flu is still very low as well. No case of human-to-human contact has been detected so far. So at least some good news on that front, that it isn't being passed human to human. That was obviously the concern of COVID. But, obviously serious concerns. The California, state of emergency is never a good thing. And the first severe illness coming out of Louisiana, Amber.
Yeah, I think the good news is that you can probably start to avoid this by not playing with dead chickens.
You made that point
right?
in the story.
Especially if you're
intro.
an older individual with comorbidities, typically best to stay away from that sort of thing.
Yeah. You heard it here, Dr. Amber.
Yeah, Dr. Amber. Look, right now I don't have much concern about this. We'll see, obviously, what happens. But I'm always careful about these illnesses that come out, and we're like, oh my gosh, is this the next COVID? Is this the next pandemic? COVID was probably a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood.
Yep.
And I don't want to get people too spun up about something with, again, only one confirmed human case, which was easily avoidable.
With serious illness, there's been 61 human cases, like with pink eye or a cough or something like that. This was the only
one with serious.
Where the patient was hospitalized. I think it's good advice, as you rightly point out, kind of like, my arm hurts, doctor. Well, stop, playing with your arm. This element of common sense needs to prevail. One of the dairy farmers in California, in a New York Times article, called this COVID for cows. We'll see if that's the case. We've obviously had mad cow before, we've had avian flu before, and the real concern, as I said at the outset, is that human to human. Once it makes that jump, but I think coming out of the COVID pandemic, and I hope you're right, and I trust that you're right, that was similar to what we saw with the Spanish flu, a once in a generation pandemic that we saw. That this is not the case, but it's never a bad idea to be prepared.
No, surely not. And I think if there were some things that we did learn from the COVID pandemic in responding to these illnesses, it's that you should have targeted protection of the elderly and people with multiple comorbidities rather than a blanket restriction on the entire American populace. You should make sure that you have PPE available in the United States as opposed to requiring China to send it to you, right? Reshore PPE manufacturing and also manufacturing of drugs and other things that you might need to treat people. And also don't be afraid of therapeutics. Sometimes waiting for a vaccine, that's a process that takes a lot longer. And then in the case of the COVID vaccine, we know that it didn't stop people from getting it. It only reduced the risk of severe infection or death. So think creatively about how to help people who do get severe infection before that vaccine comes around. And I think those are maybe three things that we can sort of take away. And
overarching, just common sense, to your point. I think those all can be looped into that. I am hopeful. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of the data out there, full transparency, which is certainly important. That's not something that we had with COVID coming from China. So I have much more faith in a domestic issue that we're seeing, transparency, full information being disclosed, talking about the number of dairy positive cattle and cows as part of this, that we have a much better handle on this than something that was coming from overseas that we didn't have a handle on, didn't have full transparency. We're still asking questions about the origins of that. We know the origins of this avian flu. We can test it, we can track it, and to your point, hopefully minimize it by targeted engagement.
Yeah, and that's a good point about the origins of COVID. I mean, this appears to be naturally occurring, whereas COVID.
And it's been in the past with avian flu is
Sure,
certainly
H1N1 during the Obama administration. And COVID, most of the intelligence agencies now agree, did leak from that Wuhan lab and could have been the result of gain-of-function research funded by the U.S. Another lesson learned, hopefully.
We're sticking to the birds on this one.
Yeah, stop making bioweapons. But the point being that it's quite likely that COVID was able to spread as quickly and severely as it did because it wasn't a naturally occurring virus, because it maybe had been juiced up or something to that effect in a lab. So,
Because we didn't have those original strains either because of the lack of transparency from the CCP.
Yeah, we weren't allowed to go in and go into the lab. So we're going to keep an eye on the bird flu. If we have any other updates, we will let you know. But for now, don't play with dead birds. We have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising right after this.